People may call their next witness, please.
Tom Finger, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir. Could I have you raise your right hand for me so that I can administer an oath? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Thomas Emmanuel Finger, Thomas Emanuel.
And your last name?
Finger.
Is it Finger?
Finger.
Just like a finger. All right, thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Brockler.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine.
What do you do there?
I do research and teach in neuroscience.
Did you back in 2012 participate in a neurosciences class that was mandated by neurosciences students?
Yes, several.
And was there a particular course that you were the co-director of in the spring of 2012?
Yes, it's called Fundamentals of Neuroscience.
And was the defendant seated here in this striped shirt with the glasses and now with the beard and mustache, was he in that class?
I would not recognize him in his current appearance, but James Holmes was in that class.
Okay, and the James Holmes that you came to know from subsequent reports was accused of committing a massacre at the Century 16 Theater?
Your Honor, objection, argumentative.
Sustained. Give me just a moment, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brockler. Okay. Mr. Brockler, I apologize. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, you taught that class in the spring of 2012 with who else?
It was starting in the winter, actually. It went from December until March, and I taught it with Dr. Diego Restrepo and Dr. Akam Klug, and then we had a number of other lecturers involved.
And you said all of the first-year neuroscience students had to take this course?
That's correct.
And you're not aware of any other James Holmes that took that course from you at that time for that
That's
first year?
correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In that particular course, as the co-director, can you just give us a brief description of what that course was about?
The course was about kind of how the brain works, what the wiring is, what the different parts do.
Oh, that is pretty brief. Thank you. And in this particular case, did you have exams, quizzes, some way of evaluating the performance of students?
There were 2 exams throughout the 3-month period, and then the students were expected to participate in class discussions and to present ideas in class from their readings.
And at the end of that particular course, did you then take on the responsibility of producing a record or email to notify them how they did?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Sir, I'm handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1249. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, this was the form email I distributed to each of the students where I substituted in their particular grade in the course.
Now, first off, the information that's contained in there, is that information that you generate pursuant to an activity you regularly conduct as a professor?
I'm not clear on what you mean by that.
Do you regularly put together a form email like this to send to the students to notify them how they've done?
As course director, that would be my responsibility.
When you did that, was that shortly after that information was generated about how Mr. Holmes performed?
Yes, the date on the email is April 5th, and the course would have ended the last week of March.
Now, do you even maintain this particular record in your emails even to this date?
I have a copy of this, yes.
And have you confirmed that that is a fair and accurate copy of that record that you sent to him?
Yes, I have.
And how did he do on that course?
He got a grade of A in the course.
Now, there was some other information that's contained on there. What's that?
That on
Objection,
the,
Your Honor. This hasn't been moved into evidence. I would object to the witness testifying to what's on it.
Mr. Bruckler?
Your Honor, I can move to admit it then. Your Honor, I would move to admit People's Exhibit 1249 into evidence prior to that answer.
All right, is there any objection, Ms. Hicks?
Yes, we'd object under 802, 401, 402, and 403.
What's the response to the hearsay objection, or do you want to approach? Why don't you approach?
Yes, sir.
All right, would counsel approach, please? All right, thank you for your patience, folks. I appreciate that. The objection on hearsay grounds is sustained. The objection on relevance grounds is overruled, but the objection on hearsay grounds is sustained. Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, you had already indicated to us that he got an A for the overall grade. Was there a final portion of the exam that you also graded as part of making up that A grade?
Yes, there was an anatomical component.
And can you describe, and do you mind just scooting in just a little bit more? What's the anatomical component? What would that have
So we
covered?
asked the students, I think it was 8 basic questions of brain anatomy, the structure of the brain. And we had the expectation that the student should, I mean, these were very straightforward, simple questions, and we had the expectation that all the students should pretty much get them all right.
And how did James Holmes do on
He
it?
got them all right.
One last question. You said this class had about 8 people in it, is that fair?
Right.
Do you have any recollection of at any time the defendant or the student you knew to be James Holmes ever behaving inconsistently with the way that all the other students behaved, not only in the classroom, but in the presentation of any exams or tests or quizzes that you offered them?
No, his behavior was entirely consistent with the rest of the class.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, is there any cross-examination?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Is it Dr. Finger?
It is.
Okay, Dr. Finger, I just want to ask you a few questions about the fundamentals of neurobiology class. And in order to do that, can we put up D-TR-8, please? I want to help the jury have a better kind of idea of the time frame. So do you see where that class is represented on this diagram?
Yes,
Okay, is that where it says fundamentals of neurobiology?
it is.
Can we call that box out, please? And does that represent the dates of the start time and the end date of the class?
If your records are correct, yes. I mean, it's in keeping with about what I know, but yes.
Okay, it's consistent with what the time frame you know that class to occur
Yes,
on a yearly basis?
right.
Okay, thank you. Now, you said 3 people were administering this class?
There are 3, well, see, I don't remember back in that year how, there were at least 2. There were myself and Dr. Restrepo, and then Dr. Klug came on board as another co-director sometime in that time frame, and I'm not sure for that year whether he was already a co-director or just heavily involved in the class.
Okay. So when you were co-directing a class with somebody else, do you attend every single session of the class?
No,
Okay. You do attend some of the classes.
yes.
Do you recall which classes you would have attended this particular year?
I can't be precise, but I, of course, attended all the classes where I was the instructor of the class, and
Yep.
those would have been in the December and early January timeframe.
Okay. I am going to show you something when I find it. And this class started, like we said, December of 2011 into March of 2012, correct?
Correct.
And Your Honor, if I may approach, please?
You may.
And before you take a look at this, I want to ask you a few questions first. Would it kind of refresh your recollection to look at the syllabus from the Fundamentals of Neurobiology course from 2011 to 2012?
Definitely.
Okay, go ahead and take a look at that document, and once you review it, if it refreshes your recollection, please look up. Okay, did that refresh your recollection?
It did.
Okay, so what I believe, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, is that you probably attended the introduction class on December 12th. Is that fair?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
You can't read from the document,
Oh.
so if you're done with it, turn it over,
Oh.
please, and then put it down. Thank you. All right.
And then I understand that you taught in that course on January 5th. You need to look at it again?
I would need to know the subject matter of what January 5th was, and then I could tell you, or I could look at the document.
Go ahead and look at the document again and let me know if it refreshes your recollection.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so it refreshed your recollection? Is that a yes?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And so you did teach on January 5th of that year?
Yes.
Okay. Would that have been the only lecture you taught for that course?
No, recollect from reviewing the document that I gave additional lectures in the course.
Okay, and do you remember when that was? What date?
I'd have to refresh my memory again, as you
Please. Yes, please.
January 18th.
Okay.
February 13th.
Okay.
February 17th. And that would be it.
Okay. When you are teaching in class and giving a lecture, I'm envisioning you just standing before the class and giving a lecture. Is there much interaction with the students?
Yes. So, I mean, typically the didactic part, the standing in front of class and just lecturing, as you put it, would be consuming half the time, and the rest would be trying to get the students to engage in dialogue about the subject matter.
Okay. Is it fair to say that on those occasions that you were teaching in that class that Mr. Holmes was sort of a quiet student in that class?
Yes, I would say he was in the quiet half of the class.
Okay. He was able to speak to you when you called on him, is that right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Able to answer questions when you called on him?
Yes.
But he didn't really speak out on his own. It was only when he was called on that you heard him talk.
In my observation of the class, he rarely volunteered information, except when it was, I mean, so we would have assignments that would, a particular person was due to give an assignment, he would fulfill that presentation aspect, but didn't participate that much in dialogue that would go on.
Okay. You said that he got an A in that class, is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it correct that about at least 50% of the students in that class also got A's?
I don't remember.
Do you remember?
But that would be typical,
Okay.
A or A minus.
Okay. Do you also indicated that on that last sort of portion of the final exam, the anatomy portion, that was a very kind of simple, basic set of questions. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And my understanding is that you, of the 8 students in that class, seven of them got an 8 out of 8 on that portion of the exam.
That's correct.
Okay. And again, that exam would have been turned into you. Was it a take-home exam?
I'm not positive, but I think that, I mean, so the exam had the 2 parts, the anatomical part and the non-anatomical part. And I believe the whole thing was a take-home exam, but it's conceivable that the anatomy part was done in class.
Okay.
But I just don't remember that year how we did it.
But it's written, not oral.
Yes.
Okay. And that would have been done in the first couple of weeks of March of 2012, is that right?
It would be after the last date of the class, and from the paper you gave me, the class ended in the first week of March, so it probably would have been the second or third week of March.
Okay. I just have one other question for you. Was it part of your, you said not only do you teach at the school, but you also do research?
Correct.
Okay. And that's true for every teacher in the neuroscience program, is that right?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. And I understand that you recall that Mr. Holmes was really not interested in working in your lab, is that right?
Well, I don't believe we ever discussed it, so I presume he was not interested.
Do you recall that Mr. Holmes was more interested in disease process and trying to cure disease versus the sort of taste and smell disciplines that you were researching in your lab?
No.
Sustained.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Finger. I don't have any other questions for you.
Do you have any redirect, Mr. Brockler?
I do, Your Honor, briefly. Hey, Dr. Finger, and it's doctor, right?
Yes.
Dr. Finger, that A that you gave, was that based on the input of professors and other teaching people that covered the entire duration of the course?
Yes, it was.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is there any request?
No, there isn't, Your Honor, and we don't have any objection to releasing him.
The jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. Mr. Brockler, may this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness, please.
Ben Garcia. Do you want that back?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Come around this way, please, sir. Good afternoon. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name for the record?
Benjamin James Garcia,
And can you spell your first, middle, and last names?
BenjaminJamesGarcia.
All right, Mr. Garcia, you are soft-spoken, so I'm going to ask you to move the microphone and put it really close to your mouth so that we can all hear you, please. Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Sir, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a PhD student at the University of Colorado.
You know the defendant seated here in the striped shirt with the beard and the mustache and the glasses?
I do.
How do you know him?
He's also a student a few years ago at the University of Colorado,
You know his name.
James Holmes.
I want to talk to you about how you came to know the defendant, and then we'll move through the period of time that you spent with him or knew him, okay? Is that all right?
Yep,
All right. First off, are you nervous?
a little bit.
Okay, that's fine. I want to bookend sort of the dates that we're talking about here. First off, when was the earliest time that you think that you had any contact or had the opportunity to observe the defendant while you were at the University of Colorado?
Either end of August or beginning of September.
Of 2011?
Yes,
When would have been the last time that you had the opportunity to observe the defendant?
probably beginning or middle of May 2012.
All right. I want to take you back to that first part. Now, you said you are still a PhD student at CU Anschutz Center. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Now, are you a neuroscience student?
No,
What are you studying?
computational biology.
Is computational biology the same PhD program that Miss Dada, who we heard from earlier, is in?
Yes.
Now, tell us how you first came to see and meet the defendant.
So we shared a biology class together at the beginning of the year that all the first year students had. And so we initially met in class.
And do you remember how that meeting took place? Who approached whom? Anything like that?
Pretty sure like our group at the time, which was me, Tim, and Gargi, approached him.
And to be clear for the record, you said Tim. Can you give us that guy's full name?
Timothy Tapscott.
And is Tapscott Tapscott?
Yes.
And had you guys already sort of formed a group before you met with the defendant?
Yes.
And where did you guys meet?
We also, so I met Tim in class and I met Gargi at our interviews.
Now, since you're not a neurosciences student, how did you come to have a class with the defendant who is?
So all of the first years all had the same biology class.
Was that one of the core classes?
Yes.
Can we get D8, please, ma'am? Now, I have not shown you this before, but there's a bunch of core classes. Do you see that on your screen there that they say core on them?
Yes.
All right. Were you in each of those classes along with Miss Dada, Mr. Tapscott, and the defendant through that period of time?
Yes.
Did you have additional classes in 2012 with the defendant?
Yes.
What were those classes? Do you remember?
It's the biological basis of neurological disease or something like that.
Did that last all the way through to that last May date that you tried to tell us about?
Yes.
Ma'am, thank you. So what were your first observations of the defendant? How did he seem to you?
Just seemed very quiet.
And how do you remember getting him involved into that small group you've described?
Just by talking to him and interacting with him during class.
And what were your perceptions of him then?
Just that he was quiet, didn't really talk very much.
Was he funny?
In what way?
In the funny way? I don't... did he have a sense of humor?
So he did have a sense of humor. He liked puns and stuff like that.
Okay. And was that pretty evident early on?
Yes.
In class, you guys would sit near each other?
Yes.
Did you start to do things like study together or do things outside of class together?
So after probably a month or two, we started hanging out outside of class, studying, hiking, and playing board games.
Okay, tell us about the hiking. Where would you go, and would it be with that same group you described?
It would be at the same group. So the one that I remember is Dinosaur Ridge. I'm pretty sure there was a few others, but that's the one that comes to mind.
And when you said you would play board games, what kind of board games are you talking about?
So Dominion was one of them. I don't remember any others.
What's Dominion?
So it's a card game, so you have money that you buy cards with and that you use it to try to get points.
Okay. No hotels or houses or
Nope.
little dogs, nothing like that? Okay. And when you would play those games, and where would you do it at someone's house, at a community center? Where would you do it?
So at someone's house.
Had you been to the defendant's apartment over this period of time?
Yes.
How would you describe it?
Say the parts that I saw were clean, very well upkept.
Was it always like that up until the last time that you had been at the defendant's apartment?
Yes.
Which would have been when? When was the last time you think you were there?
Probably sometime around April.
Of 2012?
Yes.
All right. Did you guys end up doing things like taking meals together and doing other entertainment activities together?
So eating dinner, lunch, movies, stuff like that.
Would you go out to eat? Would you order in? I mean, did you have a preference? Was it all of that?
Say all of that.
Okay. And would sometimes you'd eat at the defendant's apartment?
I don't remember.
How about yours?
Yes.
Miss Dada, Mr. Tapscott?
Yes.
What entertainment things would you do other than hiking or the board games you've described?
So movies was one thing that I remember.
What kinds of movies did you see with the defendant?
So the two that we saw in the theater were the Sherlock Holmes movie and then the Hunger Games movie.
And tell us what theater you saw those two movies at.
It's the theater in Aurora. So I don't remember the name of it, but it's the one where the shooting happened.
Okay. And do you know why you guys picked that movie? I mean,
This
I'm
is-
sorry, that theater. Sorry.
I think it's the closest to his apartment.
When you went to those two movies with the defendant, were Miss Dada and Mr. Tapscott with you?
Yes.
Do you remember when those two movies were that you saw them at that theater over the course of that roughly September to May time period?
So the Sherlock Holmes one was probably around December or whenever that one came out, and then the Hunger Games was April.
Okay. Now, over this period of time, did you become friends? Would you have described yourself as a friend of the defendant's?
Yes.
And did you know if he had any other friends that he hung out with other than you, Mr. Tapscott, and Miss Dada?
I did not.
Did he ever talk to you about any other friends that he had?
He did not.
Did you ever see him hanging out with other people in class?
I did not.
Now, there's someone named Hillary Allen. Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Was she in your classes also?
Yes, she was.
Do you know her to be a neurosciences student just like the defendant?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever see them hanging out together?
No, I have not.
Did you ever see them sitting next to each other in class, chit-chat, and any of that stuff?
I did not.
Over the course of the time that you saw the defendant in class, did you have the opportunity to see him give any presentations?
I did.
When?
At the end of our neuroscience class. So this would be probably May timeframe.
Okay.
May of 2012.
And you were saying the May time frame before that?
So May, I don't know when in May it was, so it's just May 2012.
Okay, thank you. Did you also have to give a presentation?
I did.
And was everybody in there watching each other's presentations?
Yes.
How many students in that class?
Say on the order of 10 plus or minus.
What was your perception of how the defendant did in that presentation?
Say it's a socially awkward presentation.
In what way?
So basically, he seemed uncomfortable giving that presentation, uncomfortable being in front of people talking.
Now, based on the amount of time that you'd spent with him in the preceding 8 or 9 months, was that performance unexpected or inconsistent with what you would have expected?
I'd say it was very expected.
Okay, how about the content of it?
The content to me was fine or acceptable.
And was there PowerPoint slides that had to have been generated and displayed also?
Yes.
Any problems with those?
Nope.
Misspelled words?
None that I noticed.
Okay. Also, over the course of that year, did you guys have the chance to talk about things other than school?
Say yes. I don't really remember what we talked about. Nothing too personal. So,
Sports?
talked about sports a little bit.
Do you remember if the defendant talked to you about anything that he liked in particular about sports?
The San Diego Chargers.
And you didn't hold that against him?
Nope.
Okay. How about his family?
Uh, know very little about his family. Never really talked about his family.
At some point during this period of time that we're talking about, September to May, did the defendant become romantically involved with Gargi Dada?
Yes.
Do you remember about when that was?
Probably around October, plus or minus.
Plus or minus?
Well, probably October, November.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is if you say like plus or minus a month, that's bigger than plus or minus a week or two. Are you pretty comfortable with October, November?
Yes.
Do you remember how that came to be, how that transition went from, hey, we're in class together, hanging out, doing some hikes, to boyfriend, girlfriend?
So initially she found him attractive, and I teased her about it and kind of pushed her into asking him out.
How did you do that?
Just kind of teased her about just saying that if she wasn't going to ask him out, I would, in a kind of joking manner.
You mean ask him out for her?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. And once she approached him, did they seem to get along okay?
They seemed to get along well.
A lot of public displays of affection or not?
Not so much.
If you saw anything affectionate between them, where would it be?
What do you mean?
Well, do you ever remember seeing them like hold hands in class or arm around each other or something?
Probably some hand-holding in class, but nothing else comes to mind.
Did the fact that they began dating create any sort of change in the relationship that you had with either Miss Dada or the defendant?
Not really.
Did you guys continue to do things together outside of class?
Yes.
Over the period of this time, did you communicate with the defendant other than in person?
So communicated through GChat and through instant messaging.
And how are instant messaging and GChat different? Just for the record, I know.
So one is through the phone, the other one's through the computer.
Do you have any of those old instant message things, texts, or
So
anything?
those weren't on my phone when they extracted the information from my phone.
Okay, but the GChat survived.
Yes.
And the GChats that we're going to talk about, do you remember ever deleting or changing any of them, or are these them?
I didn't delete or change any of them.
There's something else I want to ask you about. Cell phone cover.
Yep.
Was there something that happened that caused you to have a cell phone cover like the defendant's?
So he gave me a similar cell phone cover that he had.
Describe it for us.
So it looks like a tape cassette. We both had different colors.
Okay, and what color was yours?
I think it was white, but it was either white or black. I don't remember.
Do you remember what the defendant's was from that long ago?
The opposite one.
Okay, whatever the other one was that you didn't have. Also, during this period of time, did you change your hair color?
I changed it to red
When did you do that?
sometime in spring.
While you were still in class?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Sir, I'm handing you what has been marked as People's Exhibit 12. You take a look at that and tell us if you recognize what Exhibit 12 is.
So these are our GChat messages that I had with the defendant.
And is that a complete, I guess, compilation of the GChats that you had with the defendant?
Yes.
And if there are dates on there and times, do those dates and times, are those fair and accurate based on what you recall from when you had these conversations?
Yes.
Where it says me on there, who is that?
That would be me.
And where it says D. Sherlock B, who's that?
That would be the defendant.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to move for the admission of People Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Ms. Hicks, is there any objection to P-TR-12?
You're not object under 401, 402, 403, and 806, or 802, sorry.
Can I see that, sir? Would counsel please approach? right, the objection under Rules 401, 402, and 403 is overruled, and the objection under Rule 802 is also overruled. So the exhibit is admitted. That's People's Exhibit P-TR-12. Members of the jury, to the extent that this exhibit contains statements by someone other than the defendant, in other words, by this witness, they are not being admitted for the truth of the content of those statements. They're being admitted for the limited purposes of placing the defendant's statements in context and making the defendant's statements intelligible. You are not to consider the statements made by this witness in this exhibit, in this GChat exhibit, for any other purpose. Does everyone understand that? All right, and everyone's saying yes and not in their head yes. All right, Mr. Proctor, you may proceed. Sir, Mr. Garcia, here you go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hey, sir, for future use, I'd like you to do us a favor. I know it's been admitted, but with the agreement of both parties here, could you write your name on the top of that? And it doesn't have to be your full name, just Ben Garcia, and then today's date. Which
What's today's
I'm
date?
being told it's June 17th, 2015. Here's what I want to do. Before we start to talk about and put into context, I guess, what you and the defendant are discussing in these G-chats, there were a few other things I wanted to ask you about leading up to that, okay?
Okay.
Now, you had the opportunity, based on your description, to see the defendant in groups of people, large groups, in small groups, with people he was unfamiliar with people he was familiar with. Can you describe for the jury, please, how he was in different settings and different situations?
So he was a lot more comfortable talking to people that he was familiar with and didn't talk very much in larger groups, especially people that he is unfamiliar with.
And did you see that pretty much consistently throughout the period of time that you had the chance to observe the defendant?
I did.
Did he like going out and doing social things like going to bars?
So he didn't like going to bars. He went with us anyways.
Just for companionship sort of thing?
Yep.
Did you ever see him go up to anyone and approach them and initiate sort of a friendship or conversation?
No.
In the time that he was dating Miss Dada, did you observe any differences in the, I guess, the demeanor or affect or presentation of the defendant?
No.
And is that true for even afterwards?
Say afterwards he seemed a little bit angrier.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. Did he ever discuss with you, during the time that he was dating Miss Dada, did he ever discuss with you his relationship with her?
Not that I remember.
Okay. And did you inquire of him about that, or was it just sort of an unspoken thing?
I did not inquire anything about it.
Were you aware of what he did over Christmas break?
No.
And I take it you guys didn't hang out over Christmas.
No.
Do you remember if you got together over Thanksgiving prior to that?
I'm pretty sure we had a Thanksgiving dinner, the group of us.
The defendant's demeanor and affect and presentation before and after Christmas, did you notice any differences?
Just seemed a little bit angrier starting in the January time frame.
Did you talk with him about that?
Not really.
Did you have discussions about, his general outlook on people?
So did have those discussions, and he seemed outwardly hostile towards people, but nothing specific in the conversations that I had with him.
What does that mean?
Means that he kind of felt angry at the world around him, angry.
I'm going to move to strike at this point with regard to speculation. There's nothing indicated by this witness that these are statements that Mr. Holmes made that have seemed or what this witness is inferring. And I think that's an appropriate testimony.
The objection is sustained. Here's the cautionary instruction that I'll give you. You can't speculate, but you can testify about your observations. And so, Mr. Brockler, I'll let you ask a different question, okay?
Yes, sir, thank you. Here's what I want to do. I'll ask you about observations, but then I'm going to ask you about, if you don't know the specific words to the effect of or the message that he said to you, but don't interpret what he was getting at with that. Is that fair?
Yes.
What observations did you make of him that led you to conclude that he was upset with people in general?
Just our IM conversations.
That's the G chats we're going to talk about?
So no, those are the ones that weren't able to be taken off my phone.
Okay. And what sort of things would he have told you?
So one thing that I remember was I was feeling depressed, and he told me that I should take my anger out externally instead of internally.
Did you ask him what that meant?
I don't remember the specifics.
Do you remember if he said anything back to you after that, clarifying what he meant by take it out externally?
So that conversation did continue, but I do not remember the specifics.
Did you have any other conversations with the defendant like that?
There's a few from the January to March timeframe that were also IM conversations.
Now, despite those conversations, and were they consistent in sort of their tone and their message?
Yes,
And you don't remember the specific words of it?
I do not.
Is this also during a period that he's still going to school every day and you're seeing him in class?
Yes.
And I should ask you this, over the course of time that you saw him, from roughly September through that May time period, did he ever physically appear different to you in terms of hygiene, dress, any of that?
No.
How about in terms of his attitude and conduct in class? Same as in May as it was in September?
Yes.
You have any idea how he was doing in classes based on what he told you?
So at least in classes, he is doing well enough to pass. And that's all that I remember about that.
Did he talk to you at all about how he was doing in his laboratory rotations?
So I knew how he was doing in his lab rotations. I do not remember if he told me or not.
Okay, that's fair. The relationship between the defendant and Miss Dada, do you recall that ending?
So it ended, I'd say, for the first time around the January timeframe, and then ended for the second time around March.
Is that your best recollection?
Yes.
Now, if Miss Dada gave different dates, you'd go with those, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of when the relationship ended the first time, did that coincide with what you've described as sort of a perceived increase in anger by the defendant?
Yes.
Do you remember there being a period of time where they were no longer boyfriend and girlfriend, but they were still kind of seeing each other?
Yes.
Do you remember how that ended?
I don't remember the specifics.
Do you remember at some point the defendant not only cutting off ties with Miss Dada, but with you also?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So the first time that happened was around the January timeframe when they first broke up, and then the second time was around the April for reasons that I don't know.
How could there have been a second time? What got it going again?
So we continued to try to talk to him, and he was still open to us communicating with him.
And during that period of time was when Miss Dada and the defendant sort of hooked back up?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like to do is, do you have that Exhibit 12 in front of you, sir?
Yes.
Ma'am? You, ma'am? Could you put up 12-1, please? Bless you. And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, can we publish this through the TV to the jury?
Yes.
Now, here's what we're going to do. Okay? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about and put in context some of these things, sir, and then we're going to publish these individually to the jury, and they'll be able to flip through them, okay? So I just want to ask you a few questions about what was going on here, all right? Fair?
Okay.
This one we can see is dated November 10th, 2011. Best recollection, is that the first time you guys did sort of the G-chat thing?
Yes.
Now take a look down here. It's a little light, but where it says me, which you've previously told us you begin this conversation with woof. What's going on through this conversation?
So basically, dogs introduce themselves by barking or whatever dogs do to introduce themselves, and that's kind of how I felt like introducing this conversation.
And did he play along with you through this?
Yes.
Now, is this consistent with the sort of banter that you would have either in person or through the G-chats that we're going to see?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, 12-2. Just if you blow up that top part, ma'am. There's a couple things that I want to ask you about here. One, there's a reference to Hillary by the defendant here. Is that the Hillary Allen I asked you about earlier?
Yes,
Do you remember what this is in reference to?
I do not.
Okay. There's another portion in here that's a reference to donuts. Do you remember what's going on there?
Yes, so this was a joke about Tim having a crush on Kirsten and how he brought in a donut and how we were joking about how he'd share it with Kirsten.
Was this other conversation that you'd had even outside of G-Chat about Kirsten and donuts?
Was there another one? Is that what you
No.
asked?
Did you have other conversations related to this sort of thing prior to this?
No.
There's also a reference in here to how classes are going, and you guys talk to each other about the professors. Did you do that routinely, or even outside of the G-Chats?
Say it wasn't uncommon.
What were the defendant's general statements to you about his classes? And maybe they were varied, but do you remember?
Say overall his classes went well and that he was passing them.
Did he like them?
I don't know if anybody liked them.
Okay, that's fair. Did he ever talk to you about his feelings about the professors with whom he had rotations? And I'll give you 3 names. If you don't remember them, you just say that. Occam Klug, Mark Delacqua, and Kurt Fried.
So I don't remember any of those names.
Great. Do you remember him talking about any particular rotation that he thought well of or poorly of?
So it was either his first rotation or his second.
Because he's already indicated that he doesn't know if it was Mr. Holmes that ever told him anything about the rotation.
The objection's overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, hold on a second.
sorry.
Actually, give me just a second. You could talk about it to the extent that it was Mr. Holmes who told you this, but otherwise you cannot. Does that make sense? So if you heard it from someone else, then that's hearsay and it's not allowed.
So if I don't know, then I can't say.
That's right.
Unless you heard it from Mr. Holmes.
So I don't know if it was from Mr. Holmes or not about his rotations.
That's fair. Thank you. Ma'am, can you get 12-4? And that blow up, yeah, that top part there. Do you remember what's going on here? And I'll reference you one to the link. Does that link ring any bells for you based on the text going back and forth?
I don't remember what that link is.
How about this? At 11:46 a.m., the defendant says to you, dancing paper clips are God. What does that mean?
So that's a reference to the Microsoft paperclip that pops up and gives you help tips from the old Word and Excel.
Okay, thank you. 12:5, ma'am. This is now after Christmas break. It looks like it's January, about mid-January of 2012. Do you know what's going on here? Can you give us some sort of framework?
So we were discussing whether or not he was going to take the neuroscience class that I and Miss Data were going to take.
Did he end up doing that?
Yes.
Okay, and this is all just prelude to that.
Yes.
Ma'am, 12:6. This one appears to be from January 26th. It starts off, it appears, with you saying, "So, is there a reason why you tried to kill me last night?" That sounds serious, was it?
No.
What was it about? Tell us.
So it's just an outlandish way to start a random conversation.
And talk us through, you don't have to read every single line, but talk us through how this particular conversation progresses.
So basically it starts out by me asking him why he's trying to kill me, and then telling him that he starts out by saying that he wasn't, and it kind of goes back and forth about me still like fake believing that he was.
There are references in here to, ma'am, on 12:7, about midway through, at right after 12:08 p.m. Yep, there it is. Where he asks you or make you more paranoid, you respond with something about paranoia. Tell us what's going on there.
So this is still joking about kind of my state of mind in the conversation about how if it was true, then how can it be paranoid?
And then later on, you use terms like psychotic and psychosis. And then, ma'am, if you take us to, again, still Still going through this sort of jovial banter back and forth?
Yes.
Can you take us to 12:8? At the top here, tell us what's going on here.
So this is a discussion where he's saying that he has delusions, and I'm trying to figure out what kind they are.
Now, at this point, too, you don't know if he's still joking or not joking.
I do not.
And is that how this thing ends up going through?
Yes.
And there's a reference to Highlander down there at 12:30.
Yes.
That.
So Highlander is a movie where one of the Highlanders kills one of the other kind of immortal beings. He gains their life force and power.
Okay. Still don't know if there's anything serious or jovial about this.
Don't know.
It ends with you talking about a diet. What do you remember what that's about?
I do not.
Okay. Ma'am, 12:9. But what's going on there?
That was just a joke about one of our classmates.
And that's it.
Yep.
No response.
Nope.
Okay. Now, 12:10, ma'am. Now, this is March 29th of 2012. Now, do you remember prior to this particular chat, Miss Dada approaching you with a chat that she had had with the defendant that concerned her?
Yes.
And without going into the words that you spoke back and forth to each other, did you end up then together going and talking to the defendant about that chat?
Yes.
And what did you tell him?
So I did not talk during that conversation. I believe Miss Data talked during that conversation.
Without going into the words that she spoke to the defendant, what did the defendant convey to you both?
That he was seeking kind of professional help for his thoughts.
And the specific thoughts referenced in that G chat that Miss Dada had showed you?
Yes.
And was that the only conversation you had with him about that?
Yes.
Now, a couple days later, you guys are still doing the G chat thing. Is that fair?
Yes.
Tell us what's going on here in this particular one.
So this was talking about probably my second rotation and just discussing what I was doing.
Just more banter back and forth?
Yes.
Was there a level of seriousness to this that was different at all from any of the others?
No.
Ma'am, 12:11, please. Now, this one is April 3rd, and this would be, according to this exhibit, the last G-chat that you had. Is that consistent with your memory?
Yes.
Tell us what's going on here, if you recall.
So this is where I was bored in lab and I was reading something about the Fermi paradox and I sent it to him.
Is that what that link is?
Yes.
What the heck's the Fermi paradox?
So I don't remember the specifics at this point.
Okay, good. Me neither. And then it just ends with see you later. Do you remember getting together with the defendant again after this G-chat?
So I believe this is when around the time that we saw the Hunger Games movie, but I can't be certain.
Okay. Well, I understand. After the breakup, and I mean the second breakup with Gargi, did you have a conversation with the defendant about the way he was acting subsequent to the breakup towards Gargi?
So I think this was the first
Okay.
breakup.
Tell us about that.
He was acting.
Oh, can you take that down, man? Thank you.
Okay. So he was acting like he didn't care that they broke up, and I confronted him about it because it irritated me. And so I asked him why he was doing it. He said that he was doing it to show other people that his life was okay, that he knew it was harming Gargi, but he was still going to do it anyways.
Do you remember about when this was? You said after the first breakup, whenever that was.
Yes. So that was maybe a couple weeks after.
Describe how he was acting that caused you to become upset enough to approach him about it.
So basically he was not acknowledging that she existed at all, didn't really seem to be affected by it at all. Just if he was just walking past us, he didn't acknowledge us or didn't talk to us.
Did he tell you any other reason for doing that other than he wanted people to perceive him as unaffected?
He did not.
Your Honor, at this time, can I ask to publish to the jurors individual copies of People's Exhibit 12?
Yes. Members of the jury, we're going to publish it the same way we've done with other exhibits. So my staff is going to distribute a copy for each of you, and then I'll give you a little time to review it. While the jury's doing that, Mr. Brockler and Ms. Hicks, can you approach for a moment, please? Yes.
And specifically, Judge, I'm looking for the email from Dr. Finger that we had discussed admitting.
Oh, I have it up here. Yes, you may. All right, the record should reflect that the people just finished publishing Exhibit P-TR-12, and we are now retrieving all the copies of the exhibit from the jury, just about. All right, now we've got all the copies back. Members of the jury, it's 3:25. It's time to take our afternoon break. So let's go ahead and take our break. Please make sure you keep all my admonitions in mind during the break, and I'll see you back here in 20. Okay, please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. Let's take our break. I'll see you back here in 20. Mr. Garcia, you can go on break as well. All right, the court will be in recess. Thank you.
Please rise.